All right, teammates, it's 1 o'clock, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So something that's been happening in the last few weeks, and I don't want it to happen anymore, is we're gonna discuss for maybe 30 minutes, maybe 35 minutes, and then we'll get into some feedback and questions. There'll be questions throughout, but sometimes these video links, they need them for the next class, and so they've been cutting us off. And so I want to get better at discussing in the allotted amount of time instead of going over. And I hate getting cut off from people that are asking questions or I'm trying to say something. Also, something that I've realized is that some of these things that we talk about, man, they are super complex. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like I rush through them because in my mind, when I've learned something, I don't know if you're like this, but when I learn something, and it's very enlightening to me, for whatever reason, I think, oh, everyone else has already figured that out. I'm behind the power curve. So everyone else has this figured out. And so sometimes when I'm explaining things, and this is some of the feedback I've gotten, is that I go too fast through it. And I have to realize that we're not all on the same page, which is obviously I know that, but these are very heady and complex kind of things. The easy stuff in our life, I feel like we kind of get a handle on it, but these harder things, like, man, that's what trips us up. And that's actually what we're going to talk about today. So please try to keep me honest about 32 minutes in. Say, hey, Josh, we're there, and I'll cut off what we're going to, and we'll go into Q&A. So if you haven't figure out who I am, go back and watch some of the other videos. I do an intro. I'm gonna quit that because I want to jump right in. We're going to talk about mental models today. And what does that mental model mean? We'll get into that. But one of the good quotes that I want to start this off with is, I'm actually writing a paper on this, so I'll be interested in your feedback. Is one of the quotes is, all models are wrong, but some are useful. And what that means is, like scientific models, all of them are wrong, but they're useful for us to understand things, right? They paint a picture, they help us diagram things so that we can break these complex things maybe down into a more visual kind of thing. So when we talk about mental models, that's in the same ball game. They're all wrong, but they're useful. So I'm gonna ask you a question. So if you can go down to your chat. The question I want to ask is, a teacher once said to me that we are a sum of our experiences. So we're a sum of our experiences. What does that mean? So if you can bring into your chat, 2 or 3, 4 sentences, what does that mean? We are a sum of our experiences. So, and then just hit enter, and maybe I'll ask. So, and if you can, is everyone private? Yeah, it looks like everyone's private. I don't know how to undo that. Let me see, chat. Yep, they're all private. Can you guys still chat? Sorry, I got this set up. Nope. Yeah, all right, I clicked it back, so hopefully, anyways, I'll have to fix that later. But so here's what some of you wrote. Let's see. Your experiences shape your views on life. The way we do things shape us. We can only react on what we have lived through. Hey, Chris, can you explain that? We can only react on what we've lived through.
Well, yeah, I'm going to have a different perspective on something than someone else. My husband grew up in a third world country. I grew up in America. I'm not going to know his experiences. He can only share with me his experiences and vice versa. So my reaction is going to be a totally different reaction on something than what he is going to have.
Yeah, right. Good point. You know, we lived through what we lived through. So thanks, Chris. We can set our choices to everyone instead. Oh, we can see the comments. Okay. The combination of all individual experiences. Yeah, so this combination of all individual experiences. But like our brains are like amazing, intuitive kind of things. And so I'm going to discuss a little bit about system 1, system 2 thinking. This has been around for a while. I'm not, hopefully you understand it. If you don't, it's kind of a simple but complex thing. So scientists, you know, psychologists way back described our system 1 thinking as our intuitive thinking. So that gut reaction kind of thing that happens, you know, someone goes to strike you, you immediately react, right? Like there is no thinking to it. That's system 1. That's what bubbles up from our unconscious kind of minds. And then system 2 thinking is our analytical thinking. That's our thought process, think math. When you sit down to do some calculus, you're doing your analytical thinking, right? You need to get out the piece of paper and you know, get in there and nug it out. So just so we're on the same page, when I'm describing system 1 thinking, I'm talking about intuitive, that kind of gut reaction. And then when we talk system 2, we're thinking analytical. All right, so here's the question. How much of your day, in a given day, do you think you're driven by your system 1 versus your system 2? So in the chat, put system 1, this many percentage, system 2, this much percentage. I'd like to see where everyone's at on this. 60-40. System 1, 70. System 2, 95%. So the analytical, 95, okay. System 1, 70%. System 1, 75%. 90-10. 50-50. 60-40. System 1, the gut thinking, 10%. System 2, the analytical, 90%. Wow. Yeah. 80-20. Okay, so it'll be shocking for a lot of you to, on the literature I've read, that about 90% of our day is categorized by the system 1 intuitive thinking, the reactive. I've even seen it as high as 95% of the day. And you know, the 10 to 5% is actual reflective thought. I remember driving, I was working crazy shifts in the Air Force, and I was just extremely tired, and I went to brush my teeth, and I grabbed my razor to brush my teeth, right? And I put toothpaste on it, and I caught myself before I stuck my ding razor in my mouth. That would have been terrible. But it was enlightening to me to be like, how do you even get to that point where I put toothpaste on a razor, right? That is going through the motions, because what had happened is my wife had taken my toothbrush and thrown it away. And for whatever reason, she had put my razor in the toothbrush spot. So I wasn't even thinking. Have you ever gotten home from work and you can't remember the drive? Like you literally do not remember the drive. It's a crazy how much our intuitive thinking takes over our lives. So think 90 to 95%. Yeah, putting milk in the cupboard. Like we are really driven by this intuitive thinking. And what started this, if you go back to lesson 2, I show a really good video on this, but I'm going to tell you a story that really got me thinking about this and how much I'm controlled by this system 1. So my very good friend, this is the story of how I met my very good friend, Kyle Baker. I actually did his retirement ceremony. He was in the Air Force for 23 years. I was the keynote speaker at his retirement ceremony. But this story is really bad, so I want you to know that we're really good friends now. So me and him, the first time I met him, we were at the Air Force Senior Non-Commissioned Officer Academy. And that's the highest level of education for an enlisted member in the Air Force at the time. And one of the things we got to do for graduation is a reveille and retreat ceremony. So you think 500 people out there doing all kinds of movements and things, raising the flags, lowering the flags, and all kinds of stuff. Well, contrary to what's depicted in most TV and movies, like military members are not like constantly doing parade ceremonies. We're not doing these overtly grand ceremonies. We don't even march, you know, like we don't do this stuff. We do this stuff in basic training, but we don't do this in real life. I don't do left faces and right faces, and it's just not part of the day. We're pretty average. But in these ceremonies, you need to do this. So, and we don't want to look like a bunch of chumps. So we have to get out there and practice, because our graduation ceremony is going to be in front of a lot of people, our family and friends, and we don't want people walking into each other. So we practice. Anyways, it's the first week of our school, and I'm in one of the ranks and files, and you know, the student leaders are getting taught by the instructors on how to do this. It's been 10 years probably for most of us since we did this. And simple commands like left face, which you just turn to the left, it ain't going so well. People are turning all kinds of different ways, and it's just a cluster. Don't worry, we get it figured out, but these first couple times are not elite by any means. So we're out there for about 5 minutes, and this guy behind me, after a command is given and we all mess up, he makes a smart ass comment, right? And there's a bunch of snickers. But I remember the comment, and I immediately got pissed because this is important stuff. And like, how dare he make this smart ass comment? And then how dare these like 5 or 6 people like laugh? Like they broke their military bearing to laugh, right? Like we're professionals, man. Like we can't be like this. So the next command happens and we mess up, and he makes another comment. There is even more laughter, right? And I'm seeing red. Next comment happens, or next command happens, we mess up, and he makes another comment, and at least 50 people laugh. And I'm like, this is not a joke. And like, I have all the righteous indignation in me. I turn around to see who this person is and give him a death stare. And I see on his name tag, Baker. And I immediately thought, like, I bet it's Baker, because that's about as, 5-letter words, probably as much as he can spell. So I was pissed. And then as I turned around and gave him a death stare, he's very witty. He made a comment about me, which about 100 people laughed. And so, like, I turn around in defeat. And so the point of that story is, how fast did those emotions come on? They came on like that. And like I said, me and Kyle, we worked our stuff out, and we're very good friends. But when I think back to that time, I think back to how fast those emotions came on. And why? Why did that get me into this thinking? And this is really what drove me into this system 1, system 2 kind of thinking, like these mental models. So I went on to a discovery through that, like, because there's this quote I want to read here that I found after this experience. It's by Clyde Dennis. It says, if you aren't the one who is controlling your own thoughts, feelings, and emotions, then you are the one who is being controlled. I'll say it again. If you aren't the one who is controlling your own thoughts, feelings, and emotions, then you are the one being controlled. And what got me set onto this discovery is I wrote a paper in the Senior NCO Academy about that quote. And so I remember that scenario very vividly, because I was being controlled, like so much so that, I got anger, red in the face. I was ready to fight. All these kind of things were happening over some small comments. And it started breaking me down into like, why? Why do I react that way? And so this is where I learned mental models. And Daniel Kahneman, if you want to read his book, he talks about this. But Brene Brown, there's all kinds of people that talk about this. They all have about a little different definition, I think, so they can sell their own book. But they talk about this, and I'll break it down for you. So it's I got to break things down small. I know you are super intelligent people, but I need to break these down things small for me. So these mental models, these sums of our experiences, that intuitive thought. When I say what's 2 + 2, you don't have to think. 4 just floats to your brain, right? Like, how did that get there? When you see a lamp on your desk, you don't have to think that is a lamp. It is sitting on the desk. your brain is gathering all this information and just giving you the answers, right? So where does that come from? And what I found out, these mental models that run about 90 to 95% of our lives are shortcuts that our brain creates. And the best way I can describe it to you is muscle memory. Muscle memory is like pattern recognition. So whenever I play video games with my sons, if you have kids or you play video games, you'll understand what I'm talking about, or throwing a baseball or whatever, but I'm using the analogy video games. When I play video games with them and I see their fingers fly across the controller, right? Like they are doing amazing things with that player on the screen, flips and shooting and just all kinds of things. And I have to continually ask them which button is shoot. You know what I mean? Like, how do I turn left again? So you get where I'm going with this. The hours they have spent, they do not think about how their fingers are playing the game anymore, right? They think I need to move forward, and their thumbs and fingers do everything they need. It doesn't think. It's like driving. Or a friend of mine who's a pilot, he says your first, months and years of pilot training is trying to put it into muscle memory so you don't have to think about flying. So you can think about managing the plane, because flying should be second nature, just like driving. That's how come all of us, when we get home from work, we're like, how did I get home? It's because it's muscle memory. Just like my sons, how'd you do that? It's the muscle memory. And so if you think of mental models like that, our brain is creating these mental models all the time. There's a really good quote is, humans are the world's best pattern recognition machines in the world. So humans are the best pattern recognition machines in the world. Dominic Balsalto. We are picking up on patterns all the time. It's like with people that say, like, I don't see color, right? Like with the things going on in the world with civil unrest, civil justice. BS. Every one of us, as soon as we walk into a room, our brains are categorizing all kinds of things. Male, female, tall, short, big, small, black, Asian, whatever it is, our brains are categorizing it. They're amazing pattern recognitions. It's just what we do. It's how we create these mental models that allow us to survive. And you can see it. You can see it from the very beginning of life. I remember my son, if you have kids, if you don't have kids, you've probably been attacked by this game. My very first son, Joshua, I thought he invented this game, but then I realized he didn't. It's called the Drop Your Bottle game. And what it is he picked up on this pattern very quickly. If he dropped his bottle, an unsuspecting adult around them would pick it up and give it back to him. And then he would drop it again, and the unsuspecting adult would pick up the bottle and hand it to him. Real quickly, he learned a pattern that if I do this, this is what happens. And so, and then about by the fifth time, you don't give them the bottle back anymore, right? Because they're just going to drop it because you're being owned by them. And so these patterns are all out there that are, that we need absolutely to survive. And I want you to think about, I shared the story of how fast our brain works because we need to understand. So someone messaged me. So what's the point? We need to understand what our mental models are because they get us into all kinds of trouble. Actually, what I found out is that about 50% of our life, let me see, let me mute that real quick. About 50% of the time, our intuition is wrong. That's crazy, right? Like 50% of the time, our intuition is wrong. And so how do we survive with that? How do we fix these broken mental models is actually where I'm going. So, but I want everyone to recognize how fast this is. And then I'm gonna get to the story and we'll get to the challenge. So I'm gonna ask you a few questions and you're gonna have a certain kind of feeling about these questions. And I want you to think either good or bad. Well, I don't want you to think at all, but your brain is already gonna immediately do it. So if your boss just called an unplanned meeting for the afternoon, there's an immediate feeling of good or bad. And think about how much information went into that. Your wife says that your in-laws are coming over for dinner. There's an immediate feeling of good or bad. For us introverts out there, you love this one. Your friend invites you to a dinner party. The extroverts are like, woo, the introverts are no. But why? What went into that, right? In a Sunday afternoon, you were thinking about work for Monday. Immediately you think good or bad. So if you were to break down all those questions, how do I get to good or bad? Like, how fast does my brain work? So now I'm gonna share a story with you on how we need to break apart these mental models, and then we'll get into the challenge here. So how much time we got? So good, we're right on time. So these mental models that are driving 95% of our behavior, and half of them are wrong, like how do we start to, this is about living an authentic life. How do we start to unpackage some of this stuff? How do we get past, if you watch the video too, this natural default setting? We'll go into priming some other time, but priming is very, very key to this as well. So I hired an exec one time to work with me. And I try to be as good a boss as I can. I give a lot of feedback. I drive a lot of feedback as well. And this cat, man, he was good. He was super sharp and I loved him, and that's why I hired him, right? So I sent an anonymous feedback to his position that he was at before, and I wanted his peers to give him feedback. And he got some bad feedback. He was actually scared of the feedback that he was going to get from his peers. I'll just read you some of it. This person needs to learn how to be a real person. He's always giving the Air Force answer. He needs to put aside favoritism and treat people as equals. He needs to improve with being personable with his coworkers. He's too focused on himself and he does not think of others. These are all different feedbacks that he's received. Stop chasing the next rank. You are using people. You do not listen to people. You only answer with what works for you. You are very knowledgeable, but you have trouble relating to people. He needs to put the concern of his people before himself. These are just a few of the things that he got as feedback, right? I knew it was going to be bad because usually people like to share bad feedback. My other exec got like 6 pieces of feedback. He got 48 pieces of feedback. And so I sat down with him. I shared with him all this feedback. And like mental models, he did not accept it. He thought all of them had an ulterior motive, right? Like they just don't understand. That is not who I truly am. I have high standards that they don't meet. Think about that. 48 pieces of feedback. I have high standards that they don't meet. Cool. I sit down, we do shoulder to shoulder, we put it up there, and he wasn't hearing it. Nothing I could say could entice him on that. And so Ray Dalio, and this is going to lead to our challenge here. I'm going to share with you how I finally got through to him. Ray Dalio, he's the hedge fund manager at Bridgewater. He's a billionaire, but he has this book called Principles. And one of his principles is, because it is difficult to see oneself objectively, you need to rely on the input of others and a whole body of evidence. It's difficult for us to see the mental models that are controlling our lives. And let me, so for that person I was talking about, my exec, if you think about it, like, he was not accepting feedback. He could not see his broken mental models until we did this scenario. And you got to be asked questions. So I do this thing called a leadership journey, where I bring you in, I ask you, hey, what's the 5 highs and 5 lows in your life, your career, whatever it is. And then I ask you, you start doing your leadership journey and go through it quickly. And as you're doing it, I start writing down questions, right? Because the point is you got to do it quick, because when you do it quickly, what are you engaging? Not system 1 or not system 2, you're doing system 1. And if we're controlled 95% of the time with system 1, this is where we need to start growing. And so one of the things that this guy said was, he used the word actually. He said, I actually believe in air power. And the word actually is what got me. So just so you guys understand what air power is kind of like this motto we have where it means excellence in all you do, service before self, integrity. So by saying air power, he was saying that I believe in the Air Force. But he used the word actually. Why is the word actually important there? I actually believe in air power. The assumption being there is that who doesn't? Everyone else. And until he said that to himself, until I called him out, which I felt terrible calling him out, but he needed it, he did not believe that he thought he was better than everyone else. And he broke down and started crying because for the first time, he was able to see the way he treated people. His mental model was that he actually believed that he was better than everyone else because he believed deeper, he believed more, he believed he was better. And so he went on a long journey. This was a while ago. He went on a long journey to try to figure out how to solve that broken mental model. So before I go into the challenge, are there any questions? Because this is a very heady topic that I'm trying to talk about in 30 minutes or less. And if you don't want to type it, you can unmute yourself. Okay. So we'll get into some questions afterwards then. So I was going to, next time, what we're going to go through is the ladder of inference because mental models are super depth, but I'm going to share my screen here real quick. The ladder of inference is how we actually move up to this decision-making process. So for next time, what I want, if you want to come back, try to do a little research on the ladder of inference because all of these things that we talked about is this in action. So there's a pool of data that our brain, this is the mental models right here. These are where our mental models come in, and then we jump to a conclusion and action. This is our behavior. This is what everyone sees, but this is what went into that behavior. This is where all conflict happens. This is where all of our mental models are at, and this is what no one sees. And depending on how fast you move up this ladder, usually gets you into trouble or not. So I'll quit sharing. But so the challenge I have for you before we stop and just get into Q&A and feedback, the challenge I have for you is, so I learned this. I learned that I'm being controlled by a bunch of mental models that I can't even see, that I don't even realize that I'm doing. Just like what I was telling you with this airman I was coaching, he didn't realize he really believed that he was better than everyone else. So an enlightening moment, like what is the foundation? What are the models that I am using with my wife? And so what I did is I went and asked her, hey, what is something that I do all the time that you don't like? Be careful when you answer this question. She said, do you just want one thing or do you want the 150 I have on a list? And I'm like, no, beautiful. Just give me the one thing. And I'm going to try to work on that. She's like, whenever there's a problem, you take it personal, and you get defensive. And I was like, no, I don't. I mean, that's immediately what I said. And what I came to the conclusion is I had a mental model that as the husband, if my wife had a problem, I was failing her. Think about that. If my wife had a problem, I was failing her because my job as a husband was to make sure that she didn't have any problems. I don't know where I developed that mental model, but it took me a long time to figure that out, that whenever she brings up a problem, she is not attacking me. I don't have to get defensive. She's bringing up a problem for us to discuss. And for some of you, you're like, yeah, that makes 100% sense. I can't believe you had that. I did not see it, but I promise you, you have these kind of things in your life. So yeah, there was a good question. But that's, before I get to that question, how do you fix it? A lot of hard work. And I don't know if you ever do, but that's the challenge I have for you. The safe people in your life, the 1 or 2, 3 people that are safe in your life, I want you to ask them, hey, what's the 150, but what's the one thing that I repeatedly do over and over that you don't like? And that was my wife's, that I get defensive anytime she brings up a problem. And that has helped our marriage immensely, right? Because when she brings up a problem, you know how I react right now? I still get defensive. But before I get to behaviors, that ladder of inference, I stop myself. I have some impulse control, and I'm like, this is not a attack about you, Josh. Not everything in this world is about you. What's her problem? Let's work on it together. So that's my challenge for you. This is about living an authentic life. And when you break it down to the mental models, like when you start to understand how, back to that quote, if you aren't the one who is controlling your own thoughts, feelings, and emotions, then you are the one being controlled. So if 95% of us, 95% of our life is being controlled by these mental models that just float out of our unconscious, that turn into behaviors like that, how many of them are bad? And we talked about that. And how many can I fix? So I'll answer the question, that's good. How do I fix? Like, how do I fix this stuff? For me, if you're an old timer like me, like G.I. Joe, knowing's half the battle. Knowing that I had that mental model, it doesn't work all the time, but knowing that I had that mental model, I can identify the pattern faster. I can identify the pattern that she is bringing up a problem, and I know that my brain is immediately going to be like, she's attacking you, Josh. And so understanding, so the beginning of this is knowledge, right? The beginning of this journey is knowledge. Have I fixed it completely? No, but now that I know that happens, I can break the pattern before it gets to behavior. So that's the idea is, and I've done this over and over again with my wife, and I fall back into it all the time. And, you know, what's funny is that now that she understands that about me, she can walk me through it faster too. So that's a beautiful part of it as well. So that's my challenge for you, is to break out and ask the people in your life that you trust, that you deal with enough yeah. All right, you can create a new pattern just like when you start a new video game. Yep, that's the point, and it takes a lot of time. So questions before we get to some feedback and wrap up. Any questions on this? This is, there are books and books and books written about this, and I try to discuss it in 30 minutes. So how will you be able to watch other videos? You have to go back to the COA, and there's a link to a video hub that has all the videos that have been produced by the COA. Here, I'll also shoot you the link to the one page. And if you go to that, you should be able to get to the video hub as well. There you go. Okay. If you know you hold grudges, how can you do this more effectively, even with a safe person? Hey, Christy, can you just unmute yourself and ask? Oh, thanks, Tom. There's the link to the video hub. Christy from Dayton. Can you unmute yourself? Sorry, trying to find it. It's at the bottom left.
I've got it.
Okay, great.
So I know that one of the things that I've had to work on for a long time is trying not to take the feedback and sort of, as your example had it earlier, you know, switching it to, well, why don't you see it this way? Or, you know, with the grudge piece of it, well, now I know what you really think of me, kind of a thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, especially, so I probably skew more insecure. So I don't want to put that on you, but I'll answer you like I'm talking about myself here. On the insecure side, feedback's a threat, right? That's why it was with my wife. It's a threat. And so instead of this challenge to get better, my brain automatically, I mean, our brains, if you think about it, like I'm not being chased by a saber-toothed tiger anymore, right? Or I'm not being like, when I hear feedback, my limbic system fires, right? This fight, flight, or freeze kind of thing happens. And for most of us, it does. It's how fast can we get out of that? Some of us can get out of it faster than others. But I skew more insecure. So when I hear feedback, to your point, oh, that's how you are. Now I know I'm putting it back on them, right? As a threat, because I'm trying to protect myself. When the point is I need to grow, and to grow, sometimes I need to hear these bad things. I need to hear how bad I am. And so I'm always fighting to maintain this image that I am on top notch. And so when someone attacks me, even with the best intentions, they're not attacking me. I take it as attack. And so it's very, if you're anything like me, and I'm not saying you are, Christy, like it's very hard to work through that, but understanding the process that's what's going to happen allows you, and all of this is impulse, allows you the time to break the impulse from thought to action, to get better at it. And just like someone put down here in the chat, which is great, right? The more you do this, it's like a video game. The better your fingers will get at you'll learn the pattern to stop it. So hopefully that makes sense. It's very hard though. It's not, it was not easy for me with my wife, right? Like I explained it in 2 minutes, years, right? It took years for us to understand what the hell was going on. It took for me to understand what was going on. And I don't know where that model came from. It just is what it is. So, all right, good. Any other questions? Ernie, where did you find the ladder of inference? Is this on a per event basis or in general? So the ladder of inference, just Google it. There's tons of information out there, and we're going to talk about it next week. I wanted to get into this week, but it's hard. So is this on a per event basis or in general? So like anything, it's like anything. It starts off on a per event basis, but the better you get at recognizing the pattern, the easier it is for it to become an in general. Sorry, I gotta, let me get back here. Sorry, my computer kicked me off here. I gotta Hey, Joyce, please stop calling. So sorry, my wife's calling me on FaceTime. Yes, you start attacking it in general or on a per-event basis, and then it becomes an in general. It becomes a part of who you are. If you watch Brene Brown in the Call to Courage, she talks about this kind of story with her husband. Her husband and her were swimming, and her husband was building a mental model, and she was building a mental model, and they were completely clashing. It was a big argument. And so now what they do to stop these arguments or how to get through this is the story I'm telling myself. And when they say that, the story I'm telling myself, they're talking about their assumptions, right? They're talking about their mental models. And the more you do that, the less you have to. And so hopefully that answers your question. And to recommend a book, I would encourage you Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman, any of Brene Brown's books. This is Water by Daniel Foster Wallace. There's all kinds of things. What caused you to be cued by the word actually? Oh, cued. What caused me to cue in the word? All right, so the question here is privately. As the story, and then we'll get to some feedback. The story about me interviewing my exec with his leadership journey, and he said the word actually, like what cued me to that? So this is great. My mental model cued me to it because I didn't like the word. And so all I did was write down the word actually on my note as he was telling his story. And then when he got to a stopping point, I asked him, I didn't know where it was going to go. I asked him, hey, why'd you use the word actually? I actually believe in air power. And that's what led us down to the point where he eventually said, well, I'm better than everyone else. He's the one that said it, right? And him saying it is what triggered a rush of emotion for him, triggered his, and actually opened his eyes to seeing, man, I'm a jerk. I believe that I'm better than everyone else. And so all that feedback had now changed in his eyes, right? So when you do that leadership journey, it's hard because our society tells us not to ask these hard questions. Our society gears us away from doing that. And so you feel terrible asking the question. And so you have to put that groundwork in there, like, hey, I'm going to ask you some questions. As you tell your story, I'm going to ask you some questions because I'm uncomfortable. They might sound like I'm a bad person, but I'm really just trying to get to the thing here. I promise you, we are all very intuitive at this. It's like another mental model. You're walking down the street and you see it's dark and you see someone with a hoodie leaning up against a pole, and for whatever reason, nothing has happened. You get a bad feeling, right? What is all the information that has been poured into you? Well, years and years and years of patterns and things like that have poured into you, and you cross the street or you go the other way. You could be right, you could be wrong, but all of that information flooded into you and you felt the hair on the back of your neck stand up, right? We've all been in that situation where the hair on the back of our neck stands up. But socially, when we're in conversations, that stuff happens too. But because we want to be liked by people, because we don't want to be a jerk, because we don't actually go there. And so when you're doing this leadership journey, you got to be in a safe place to be able to be like, hey, I'm not a jerk, but I'm gonna ask you. And that's what cued me in on the word actually. My hair stood up on the back of my neck. What do you mean actually? And so my intuitive brain had picked out, I bet that's where he's going with that. So that's a great question.